of high-level talks, Palestinian officials meet in Ramallah on the possibility of halting security cooperation with Israel in the West Bank. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry meets with Saudi Arabian king and Gulf ministers in a bid to ease concerns over a nuclear deal with Iran in the works and Tehran's building power across the Middle East. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi purges his cabinet, firing 8 ministers, including Interior Minister Mohammed Ibrahim, who headed the crackdown on supporters of ousted President Mohammed Morsi.
The News Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening and welcome to the news today. In Ramallah, it was day 2 of a meeting of senior Palestinian officials. Being discussed are the overall ties with Israel and specifically the possibility of halting security cooperation with Israel in the West Bank. Much of the background of the crisis meeting is financial. In the meeting Wednesday, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas accused Israel of gangsterism over the withholding of funds, namely the transfer of over $100 million a month in tax revenues collected on the Palestinians' behalf. We will go tonight to our correspondents in Ramallah, Shai Ben Aghi, Mael Ben Uriel, and Amjad Abu Arafa. But first, let's take a look back.
أي إجراء ضد السلطة سواء حجب أموال أو منع الحركة وكل ما يتعلق بما يحيط بإجراءات هذه الإجراءات كلها بتأثر على الشارع الفلسطيني.
طب ما المجلس المركزي موجود قبل 22 سنة، موجود قبل اتفاق أوسلو، شو عمل؟
And with me on set is Dr. Ghassan Abdallah, Director, Center for Applied Research in Education that deals with nonviolent communication. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. Good evening. And also Professor Yossi Shane from Tel Aviv and Georgetown Universities. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. You know, we've been talking for the last 2 days about holding the security coordination between Israel and the Palestinians, and maybe that was the only thing that worked between the Israelis and the Palestinians. What will happen if this also will fall down?
I hope it will not. I think it's something which is essential for both communities, for both entities. I wouldn't dare to think about the Palestinians allowing something like that to collapse, because this is the trapping of the state that they want to build eventually. So you don't want the state-like mechanism, especially what we call the monopoly of the means of violence. All those forces that allow this kind of like the idea of security, internal security and external security to collapse, because mayhem may ensue and eventually it will lead to deterioration. So I assume that emotions running high and everybody has their own grievances and their own claims, counterclaims, but I cannot imagine the authorities sort of allowing for this security to just collapse and melt down, because this will be devastating for the rule of order and rule of law.
Do you think that the Palestinians should actually break the security arrangement with Israel? Because that could be maybe lack of responsibility.
Actually, the reality says to everyone that we should not give more time to discuss this, because on the ground, the Israeli security forces are always there in areas A, B, and C. They are always in these Palestinian territories, and they do whatever they want to do without even coordinating with the Palestinian Authority. They are next to Mahmoud Abbas' home. They are next to his offices. They are, from the morning till the evening, they are there.
But stopping the
if we are concerned about the collapsing of the issue of the security, I think my cousin should be also concerned about the ongoing collapsing of the health institutions and the education institutions as a result of confiscating the Palestinian money.
Yeah, but just a second, because
Yeah.
I'm asking you something and you're not answering in another direction. And what I'm asking is it this move of stopping the security arrangement between Israel and the Palestinians is a responsible move? Because the first thing that you need to think about is, and we
If you want
understand
to put
that the
it-
power of Mahmoud Abbas
Yeah.
in the West Bank is not that strong for various reasons. Also because Israel did some of the steps to make him weaker. But he's not that strong. And I don't believe if he will stop right now the security arrangements with Israel, he will end up actually maybe losing his position also.
I'm afraid I disagree with you about this. We want security coordination, not for the sake of supporting Mahmoud Abbas. Mahmoud Abbas is being supported by the Palestinians, even those in Gaza and the West Bank. That's one thing. We would like actual practical security coordination. What did this security coordination do against the gangs among the settlers, who every day either put on fire mosques or churches?
Oh, we can argue about that.
Okay,
We can
so
argue
we
about
want
the
security.
security
We
arrangements.
want security. If you allow me, please. We want security for both sides, not only from one side. Should be very clear.
Okay, before we will continue this, let's go live to our correspondent Shai Ben-Ari, who is standing right now in Ramallah. Good evening, Shai. So, Shai, you spend a day in Ramallah. First of all, let's get the latest updates from the meeting, the two-day meeting that the PLO held.
Yes, Lucy, the latest reports, we're talking about meetings that are ongoing debates, really, within the Palestinian leadership about what exactly is to be done regarding the Oslo Accords, regarding security coordination with Israel. The latest reports are that the PLO Central Committee is expected to call on the Palestinian president or the Palestinian Authority to cancel security coordination with Israel, but that will not actually happen until the president himself, Mahmoud Abbas, makes the decision to cease that security coordination. Basically, that means that all the pressure will be on his shoulders, and it will be very interesting to see exactly how he manages to exert himself from that situation. The expectation, I think, at least on the Israeli side, is that some sort of compromise will be reached, some sort of middle ground that will allow security coordination to indeed continue, because that, at the end of the day, is the interest of both sides. But for the Palestinian president to at least show some assertiveness, some sort of moral ground, let's say, against Israel, at least to help his own standing within a Palestinian public opinion. But we'll have to see. That this decision is expected either later on tonight, perhaps tomorrow morning.
Shai, what are the reactions on the streets of Ramallah to maybe this very serious step, maybe unilateral step from the Palestinians towards Israel?
Yes, well, in general, I would say that Palestinian public opinion is very eager to see some sort of drastic reaction to the ongoing crisis, which is both political and economic, between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. A lot of people do support, indeed, some sort of halting of coordination with Israel, but I think at the same time, people are realistic and realize that the actual chances of that happening are not great. Today was an interesting day because there was actually a lot of economic activity that we could sense and see on the street in central Ramallah, because today was salary day. Today, salaries did enter bank accounts here in Ramallah, but we're only talking about around 60% of the normal salary. That 60% is right now being paid thanks to bank loans taken out by the Palestinian Authority, since, of course, tax revenue funds were frozen for another month at the beginning of March. Basically, 60%. And only in the case of salaries that are around 2,000 shekels, around $500, is the full salary paid. Anything over that, only 60% thanks to bank loans. We did see lines of, say, 15 to 20 people at ATM machines today, because people have been waiting for this day for a number of weeks to basically take out cash and do some shopping. There was a lot of shopping going on today on salary day in Ramallah.
Yes, Shai Ben-Ari, thank you very, very much for this. And in a short while, we will see the piece that you made for us in Ramallah. What can be the reason that President Mahmoud Abbas is not waiting until the end of the Israeli election, until after the Israeli election, to actually do these kind of moves?
First of all, I don't want to second guess Mahmoud Abbas. We have Palestinian experts there who should do it. I think that we have seen it before. Remember, such threats were leveled before in various junctures. The frustration is perhaps great, but it would be suicidal. It would be untenable. You heard this week about the development also in the city of Ramallah and the new housing city, the 40,000 residential. You know, this is fantastic. These are good developments economically and otherwise. You know, investors are there. People are seeing a future. So you cannot kind of like break the rules of the game, even if the game is not to your liking. Because what it does, it's basically creating a chaotic situation that the cost of bringing it back, not for the Israelis, for the Palestinians mainly, is absolutely immense. And the damages are such that who are you going to hurt, as we heard? Nevertheless, and the second point, of course, you made, we are here 10 days before the Israeli elections. No one's going to pay attention. No one's going to pay attention. What we have is even for the sake of like making the argument that this is a viable move, which I don't think it's a viable move, but let's say it's a viable move. Wait for 10 days, see what's going on, see which government is going to be formed, who are you talking to, whether the spirit is changing. It doesn't seem logic at all. It seems like that is happening.
Cousin, we have been waiting for more than 2 decades, and we did not notice any change on the ground among the Israeli people and in the Israeli governments. We are not. It's important, the 40,000 apartments you are talking about. At the same time, please keep in mind that there are more than 20,000 apartments in Beit Hanina and Shafat that's waiting for demolishing by the Israeli government, the Jerusalem municipality. This is one point. Second point, what backs Mahmoud Abbas is not keeping the security cooperation. What backs Mahmoud Abbas is complying to the signed agreements between Israel and the PA and complying to the international demands by going to negotiations without any conditions. This is number one. Number two, which is stop confiscating the lands and stop fattening the settlements.
Look, there is a you know, we can go on. You take a lot of time, so let me answer. I don't interrupt you, but you take so much time, so I want to have my voice. First of all, if you talk about the rules of the game, you know, the Palestinians went to the United Nations and were trying again to internationalize the conference, went for the recognition. In complete negation of the agreements not to do so. So I don't want to argue. I'm not here to argue who has done what. I think it's absolutely ludicrous and stupid even to think that you break everything and say, okay, now let's see what will happen. It's a Palestinian kind of like mentality that has to, notwithstanding what you can say, they have grievances, etc. But the very idea of breaking, we are not playing anymore. We're going to create chaos. Chaos serves us.
No, it's
chaos
not like
never,
this.
Chaos,
it's not like this, my
chaos
cousin.
never serves the Palestinians.
My cousin, it's not like this. The Israeli mentality is looking for the time that the Israeli people like you dare to face the reality and to be honest with themselves and with the Israeli people, which is ending occupation will be reflected positively on both sides.
Do you think it will, with all due respect, and I have tremendous respect, do you think such an action of creating mayhem, of creating this disorder, of creating people frustration and maybe generating more violence will help to stop occupation, will help the Israelis to convince that here we are, now we can enter negotiation with no entity? I don't see the logic. The logic is that under tremendous stress, the entities and structures are essential for the Palestinians, no less for the Israelis.
Why not? It should be essential for the Israelis
The Israelis have their state.
The Israelis want to keep the 5 stars occupation to the West Bank and the siege of Gaza.
I'm just, you know, the arguments of the occupation is always relevant. Nobody's saying that there is no occupation in the West Bank, okay? We're all agreeing about that for a long, long time. But there is something, and there is in a lot in what Professor Shane is saying here. You cannot break the rules of the game. You saw what happened when people got to a point where they were able to do everything that they wanted in the Gaza Strip. You saw what is happening you are seeing what is happening in the Gaza Strip. In my idea, in the way that I'm seeing it, the last thing that the people in the Gaza Strip need is a really weak president in the West Bank. And this move can weaken the president in the West Bank.
You think so, that he's a weak president? You think so?
Me
as a Palestinian, I can tell you that Mahmoud Abbas is not weak. His government is not weak in the West Bank. I can assure you. This is one thing.
Explain
Second
to me
thing,
how come he's
we are
not
talking
weak in the
about
West
breaking
Bank,
the laws.
and
okay?
there is big division inside the West Bank among the PLO about the way that Mahmoud Abbas is taking decisions. There is, if Mohammed Halan is deciding to go and speak in Qatar with people from Hamas to try and take the control in the Gaza Strip, that means that something really wrong is going in the PLO. Something really wrong is going in the West Bank.
I don't think that I have to agree with your analysis.
You don't have to agree with my
You see,
analysis. It's not an analysis, it's the truth.
I think the disagreement, it's not the division.
No,
there is disagreement.
For now, I didn't analyze. You are analyzing. I am just putting the facts on the table.
May I just correct?
Yes, of course.
There isn't a division in the Palestinian leadership. There is, or there are, several disagreements on the tactic, on the approach to be adopted by Mahmoud Abbas. Mahmoud Abbas is 100% convinced of negotiations. Now, the other part of the Palestinian leadership is calling for doing something in order to show the Israeli government and the Israeli people that we can do something else. It's not only negotiations. And this something else, I can assure you that it will never be violence. It will never be violence. We are not planning as Palestinians for, but I think in the Israeli community, there are people who are willing to see a third intifada in the Palestinian territories. Let me give you an example, okay?
Before you're giving me an example.
With all due respect, there is another voice.
Before you're giving me an example, I want to put and listen to the voice from the people from the Gaza Strip. Activist Mahana joins us right now from the Gaza Strip. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Maha, you see the situation right now in the West Bank. I don't need, of course, to point out the situation in the Gaza Strip. Are you, the people in the Gaza Strip, are worried about what is happening right now in the West Bank? Maybe are seeing a little bit what we are trying maybe to understand here, that President Mahmoud Abbas is getting weaker in the West Bank?
We think so here in Gaza because we are abandoned for almost 8 years now. Gaza has been under siege for more than 8 years. We are suffering from a crisis that is described beyond the humanitarian. People here, many families have been living in homes without roofs, walls, or windows for the past 7 months, and many have just 6 hours of electricity, and now today, the only power plant in Gaza shut down completely. We live without electricity, without running water, and the humanitarian situation is worsening day after another. We believe that at this time, the government in the West Bank is getting weaker, and also the government in Gaza as well. We are stuck in the world's largest open-air prison and the worst place to live. People in Gaza are depending on aid. Thousands of people now are living in damaged buildings using plastic sheeting just to try to seek shelter. And many of them are living in shelters and temporary accommodation because their homes were destroyed and they're not being rebuilt yet.
Yes, Maha, just I want here Professor Shane want to ask you a question. Professor Shane.
We are in a very, there is a two-dimension to the Palestinian suffering. One is the dimension that we see, and anyone can watch this and just his heart is bleeding to see how people suffer. And yet, we have a government in Gaza deemed not by Israelis, by the courts in Egypt, by Sisi, as a terrorist group. Deemed by Egypt, officially deemed by Egypt as a terrorist group, not only the armed wing, the entire, and also by the Saudis. So we are sitting here and discussing who is going to run this business, that on the one hand we are being threatened that Mahmoud Abbas is not going to run, and the other hand we have a group that is governing Gaza, and it is deemed by the Arabs, not by the Israelis, as terrorists, and the people are suffering. This is a big tragedy.
But
now, just a second, sir. I will finish. So the big question is, what needs to be done? In my opinion, the rule of Gaza by Hamas is a non-starter for the well-being of the Palestinians, as tragic as it is. And this has to end.
And the blocking of Gaza is okay?
Hamas has been trying to form a unity government with the West Bank. The next week, Israel the worst and the most destructive military operation on the Gaza Strip. This means that Israel is opposing the unity government. Hamas and the Palestinian Authority signed the unity agreement, and then you saw what happened. Regarding Egypt has its own stance against Gaza Strip. I'm not justifying it, but Egypt is keeping a tight border with Gaza, and now after declaring Hamas military wing as a terrorist group, the situation got much worse in Gaza. And it's not about only Hamas. They are using collective punishment on the whole population in the Gaza Strip.
So let me the situation, Maha, is so complicated because, in one hand, if for now Israel is allowing for some days during the week is allowing humanitarian help to get into the Gaza Strip. If the Palestinians and the West Bank will decide to break the security arrangement between Israel and the Palestinians, that can affect also the people in the Gaza Strip, because if you break the security arrangement with the president of the West Bank, of the president of the Palestinian Authority, you will also be influenced. So do you think that this is a smart move to break the security coordination with Israel?
Look, I'm not against breaking the security with Israel, but I am with the unity government. Then if Israel supports the unity government between Hamas and the West Bank, and then the Palestinian Authority can take care of the coordination issue, and Hamas can take over other issues, we need this. We need this for both peoples, not just for the Palestinians, but also for the security of the Israeli people. We need the two peoples to have two states next to each other, to respect each other, to live like the rest of humanity. But we agree that there is no military solution to this conflict.
Yes,
our leaders are interested in military solutions. We are not. They must now give peace a chance. It's not about who's controlling the future. We need the future to happen. We need it to breathe.
Thank you very, very much, Maha. I think that listening to this is listening to the people, not to what you should do because of the occupation. The people are suffering in the Gaza Strip.
But at the same
time, people are not even suffering the same way in the West Bank like the people are suffering in the Gaza Strip. So maybe President Mahmoud Abbas and people who are next to President Mahmoud Abbas should tell him, listen, if you are going to do this, the people in the Gaza Strip who are already not having only 6 hours of electricity are going to suffer even more.
Is it because of stopping the security coordination, or is it because of the Israeli siege and blocking of Gaza?
It's not.
We should be courageous and face the reality.
The siege is...
Gaza is being under the siege for 8 years.
The Gaza Strip is under a siege. I agree with you, but the siege is
reason
not
is
only
the
coming from
occupation.
Israeli side.
Israel occupation of Gaza.
The Israeli occupation of the Palestinian.
There is a lot of talking. I look at the lady. I look at the suffering. Reverse causality is what it's all about. Israel withdrew from Gaza. Israel left Gaza.
Did not withdraw.
Withdrew.
Repositioning its
withdrew
forces.
from Gaza. Hamas controls Gaza. Hamas has no intention.
And Israel is blocking Gaza.
Look, Hamas has no intention whatsoever to live in peace with Israel or recognize ever Israel. Look at the rhetoric. Look at the behavior with the missiles. Look with the tunnels. What do they want? They want the people to suffer. The Arabs are deeming them as terrorists, not me. The Arabs, all the Arabs are considering them nemesis to the Arab cause. Egypt, Saudi, everybody.
On them.
So you come to Israel and say, open the blockade. On what to open? To get more missiles to Gaza? If they would only declare, we want to live side by side with Israel in peace, recognizing Israel as a state, we want to sit and dismantle all the infrastructure of terror, the infrastructure of violence, things will change in a night.
Do you think so?
I've no doubt about it. Always when people came to Israel and said we want to end violence and end war and end claims that you do not exist, Israel said and
Listen,
talked.
are there missiles in the West Bank?
I told you.
Are
you.
there missiles
Israel,
in the West Bank?
In the West Bank there are.
610 military barriers in the West Bank, my cousin.
I'm not telling you.
Look at the separation wall, my cousin.
Nothing came, the separation wall came as a result of the Second Intifada. The Second Intifada was a devastating blow to anything with negotiations. So I'm telling you, now you can always go back and say, it's not. There is a question here, and the question is whether the Palestinians can master a unified leadership that will talk only peace, will say, look, armed struggle is over. We don't want any armed struggle. We are ready to talk to Israelis. You will see what will happen to the Israeli public. But this is not the case.
Arafat said this.
Arafat never said that.
He said it.
Never said that.
Go back and read.
I read everything I could.
Professor Shane, let me just try maybe to see it from the other side. The Palestinians on their move in the last few months are trying to, go in the diplomatic arena.
Yes.
They're saying, okay, you know what? We're not playing the game with Israel anymore. We're going to get the recognition from the international society, from the international arena.
Yes.
So it seems that Israel just stopped from its side. Israel is not going and doing anything.
Right now, I will grant you, one thing I'll grant you, that we are in a halt of situation. The situation now, we are in a position of elections. There is a big debate about what should be done. Several opinions are there. One is that the Middle East itself has crumbled, and it did crumble. It crumbled. States were crumbled. We see Daesh. We see what's happening in Syria. Israel has to take precaution. We see what's happening in Jordan. We see what happened in Sinai. We see what happened in Sisi after Morsi left. So things are happening, and one should not remain blind to these changes. The second point is whether you can disconnect this from the Palestinians and what the Palestinians were intending. The Palestinians were intending at one point to think that they will go to the international body, they will get the United Nations or the Security Council, will force Israel to do something. Israel cannot be forced. What needs to be done is something magnificent. And the magnificent thing is what I said, that will come the Palestinian day, will say, look, enough is enough. We are all saying no more armed struggle. We cannot have with Ania one thing and thinking that you can manipulate this business. And when they saw the Muslim Brotherhood coming in Egypt, they will join. They will not go with Erdogan and all the stupidities. We will sit and talk, and that is what will happen after the elections. It will be part of a regional arrangement. Now we're talking about regional arrangement because there are forces of stability. Hamas is seen as a force of instability.
Yes, I think, cousin, that last week either you were not in the area here or you did not hear what happened. I think the Israeli governments are not ready, and the Israeli people are not ready yet for peace. Everyone last week was predicting the emergence of a third intifada in the West Bank. Look what the Israeli government did. And instead of giving...
One last sentence.
They went with 3,000 soldiers for military maneuvers in the West Bank, how to punish the Palestinians.
Okay, I just have to stop it here. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much.
Thank you
very much for being with me. And we're going out for a small break, 2 minutes break, and then we will be back. Don't go anywhere. In a second day of high-level talks, Palestinian officials meet in Ramallah on the possibility of holding security cooperation with Israel in the West Bank. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry meets with the Saudi Arabian king and Gulf ministers in a bid to ease concerns over a nuclear deal with Iran in the works and Tehran's building power across the Middle East. And Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi purges his cabinet, firing 8 ministers, including Interior Minister Mohammed Ibrahim, who headed the crackdown on supporters of ousted President Mohammed Morsi. Yes, as the nuclear talks with Iran gain pace, many countries besides Israel are deeply concerned over the rapprochement between Tehran and Washington. The news today is diplomatic correspondent Eli Ochenberg reports on the visit of U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry in Riyadh and the possibility the U.S. will supply a nuclear umbrella to the Gulf monarchies.
A day after the end of yet another round of nuclear talks between the West and Iran, the Gulf Arab states are making known their concerns over the Islamic Republic's atomic program, and the U.S. is trying to reassure them. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry briefed 6 suspicious Gulf foreign ministers and Saudi King Salman Thursday about the latest round of nuclear talks, and according to Al Hayat newspaper, one of the measures to calm them is to offer Gulf Arab states a nuclear umbrella as protection against Iran.
We will not take our eye off of Iran's other destabilizing actions in places like Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and the Arabian Peninsula, Yemen particularly, and whether or not we are able to reach a deal on the nuclear program. The United States will remain fully committed to addressing the full slate of issues that we have with Iran, including its support for terrorism.
So far, the U.S. has supplied nuclear umbrellas to NATO members as well as Japan, South Korea, and Australia, securing them against threats from North Korea and Russia. Like Israel, the Sunni monarchies of the Gulf, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates remain wary about the growing rapprochement between Shia-dominated Iran and Washington. They are particularly worried by its potential nuclear ambitions and Tehran's growing influence across the Middle East. Iran has provided military assistance to Syria to fight anti-regime forces and to Iraq for the battle against Sunni extremists, as it is also accused of backing Houthi Shia militiamen who have seized the capital in Saudi Arabia's neighbor Yemen and paralyzed the Western-backed government. But Kerry sought to calm fears, saying Washington remained concerned about Iran's bid to spread its influence in the region. In the meantime, Iranian foreign minister said negotiators are very close to reach a comprehensive nuclear agreement.
We are not far from reaching an agreement. There are gaps that need to be filled, serious ones. But that doesn't mean that we are not capable of moving forward. We have one very serious problem, and that is there is a great deal of pressure that is being imposed by warmongers, by scaremongers.
The talks will resume on March 15th, probably in Geneva, as the latest deadline for agreement looms at the end of the month.
Yes, and with me right now is Dr. Brandon Friedman, Research Fellow at the Moshe Dayan Center. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Dr. Friedman, let's try to understand something here. When the Israelis are really, really mad, John Kerry's not running to them, but when the Saudis are mad and when the Gulf countries are mad, he's just running right after the Geneva talks.
Yeah, I think it perhaps reflects a little bit about how the Saudis like to operate. I think the Saudis are no less pleased with what's going on with the Iran deal than Israel is. But I think that the difference is the Saudis typically like to do things behind the scenes. And I think that Kerry's visit was an attempt to perhaps calm any Saudi anxieties about a prospective deal with Iran. I don't think, frankly, that Kerry's going to have a lot of success or has had a lot of success with that. And I think that today's, press conference was an attempt to put a positive spin on what's going on. But frankly, I think Saud al-Faisal said it quite straightforward. Iran is taking Iraq. And for the Saudis, this is a really big deal. And I don't think Kerry has a really good answer for it.
Suddenly, we are also seeing that Assad and Syria are back on the table. What is it? Is it when the United States just said, okay, we're not intervening, or we're intervening into a certain phase? But it seems that, they're willing even right now to put their hands in Syria in order that the Saudis and the Gulf states won't be angry anymore?
Well, it was certainly an interesting statement by the Secretary of State Kerry, and I think what he said was there's some combination of military pressure and diplomatic pressure is going to be required to remove Assad. The suggestion there, by the way, removing Assad for the Saudis is a high priority and has been now for 3.5 years. And so perhaps what Kerry was trying to do is say, look, give us the time and space we need to get this deal done, which the Americans feel is also in the Saudi interests, and then we'll deal with Assad. And perhaps the statement was, maybe you can have our cooperation, and perhaps he even believes that the Iranians will cooperate. I would be surprised if the Saudis really buy that argument, but I think the thinking was, hey, look, the Americans are not going to allow Assad to hang on forever. I think that's the message, and it was interesting, and I'd like to hear confirmation of it.
You know what is worrying in this is that it seems that because we're seeing the Americans are rushing to answer the Israelis, to try to ease the tension in the Gulf states, can we say that maybe the Americans are feeling that they might be going to a bad deal?
No, I think that this president seems unusually committed to this foreign policy line, which is, it seems that if they can get a deal, and they seem to believe it's an acceptable deal, then that will go a long way to solving the other problems in the region. They seem to believe that throwing their lot in with Iran is the way to solve the conflicts that have the region engulfed in flames. And I think that's a fundamental mistake. But nevertheless, that appears to be the way the region is going. Now, Kerry's sort of sent mixed messages. He's saying on one hand, look, we recognize that the Iranians have not been a tremendous force for good in Yemen. We recognize that the Iranians are backing these Shia militias that are committing atrocities in Iraq. But nevertheless, they seem to believe that working with Iran in the future is going to be better than working against it. And that's the policy line they seem to be moving towards.
Dr. Brendan Friedman, fascinating what you're saying. Thank you very much
Thanks for having me.
For being here. And now we're going to Syria. Heavy fighting rocked Aleppo today, fresh off a major attack launched by the opposition yesterday. The city has been significant violence this week after a UN plan for a temporary truce there fell through. More from Maxime Perez and Ayman Siksik.
Following the last attack on one of the main headquarters of the Syrian Air Force, Aleppo is once again the scene of violent clashes between rebels and pro-Assad forces. Around 40 people were killed Wednesday, and this Thursday, the regime's troops have taken initiative. In the Jamayat al-Zahra neighborhood in the western part of the city, both sides are bombing each other. Backed by its air force, Assad's military tried to expel the rebels. For their part, the rebels failed to take over the facility targeted yesterday, which was partly destroyed in a massive blow. The violent clashes occurred only 3 days after the opposition rejected the plan of the UN envoy Staffan de Mistura, aimed at halting the fighting in Aleppo. In a harsh statement, the Commission of Aleppo Revolutionary Forces declared Sunday that it will reject any truce proposal unless it is based on a comprehensive resolution to the Syrian tragedy. In other words, the solution must include Bashar al-Assad's eviction. American Secretary of State John Kerry, who was in Riyadh this Thursday, concurs.
Bashar al-Assad is destroying his country and his people in the process to hold on to power that is not his anymore. The people have made it clear he's lost his legitimacy.
As for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Martin Dempsey, he said special forces could soon be deployed in Syria. Their mission, giving support on the ground to the moderate rebel groups, to give them finally an edge on the battlefield.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has purged his cabinet, firing 8 ministers, including Interior Minister Mohammed Ibrahim, who headed the crackdown on supporters of Assad President Mohammed Morsi. The shift comes alongside building criticism of security forces' failure to prevent attacks against them in the Sinai Peninsula and the capital of Cairo. And sitting right now with me here in the studio, senior Middle East analyst Ali Waked. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. What is he exactly doing? How come? Just woke up in the morning and said, okay, I'm going to fire you all?
He did not wake up in the morning. He just came back from Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
He heard the criticism from the Saudis about the attitude of the security services in Egypt, about the policy adopted by the security services that is creating more tension among the Egyptian society, and that Egypt is failing to face the financial and economical challenges that it is facing.
Attitude to whom? To the people in the Gaza Strip, to declaring that Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood are
First, the attitude towards the
organizations?
Saudis. Muhammad Ibrahim and other assistants of Abdel Fattah Sisi were heard in audios and videos that leaked, describing the Saudis and the Gulf state as idiots who just give money and give donations without knowing where and what and how much. And it was very embarrassing for Abdel Fattah Sisi to make this visit to Saudi Arabia after the Al Jazeera publishing all these videos and audios. But there is no doubt the Egyptian administration identifies the situation that everything goes against the plans of President Abdel Fattah Sisi, both on the social level and on the security level. Muhammad Ibrahim was the responsible in the eyes of the opposition of the killing of the opposition, of the repression of the opposition, and the new interior minister seemed to be somebody who is different. He was criticizing the behavior of the security services and want the security services to be more transparent, to be more helpful to the society and not a tool to oppress the society.
You know what you're saying is from what I'm understanding, is that there is a big, let's say, crack in the Egyptian government. There is a big crack in right now the way that he's managing the situation. Can we expect like another Arab Spring or another coup in Egypt?
You said in the government there is a crack. I think there is a crack in the Egyptian society. People lost the last trust they have in and confidence they have in the president. They see that in all tracks, in the economy, social, democracy, freedoms, nothing is going in the good direction. Egypt is in tension with the United States. Egypt is in tension with itself and with the components of the Egyptian society. The Al Jazeera contribution and videos published of the conversation between Sisi and his assistants vis-a-vis the Saudis and other is endangering the Egyptian economy, is endangering the Gulf support to Egypt. And I think Abdel Fattah Sisi is sending a message to the Egyptians and to the international community. I understood the lesson. I am taking I'm understand the conclusion, the good conclusions, and I'm trying to change. Now the question is whether changing the persons will include a change of the policy.
Yes, Ali Waqid, for our viewers who understand Arabic, you can see him just in 2 seconds in the Arabic studio. Thank you very much for this. And Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is rumored to have been hospitalized in critical condition. That's according to Arabic media reports, just days after a report by French Le Figaro stated doctors has given Khamenei only 2 years to live. The 76-year-old leader is suffering from stage 4 prostate cancer, which has spread to other parts of his body. We're going to Ukraine. Meanwhile, the conflict in eastern Ukraine continues, though in a state of fragile ceasefire. To see more from Roy Shapira.
From a ceasefire to perhaps another escalation, the Ukrainian parliament passed a law Thursday to expand the armed forces by a third.
The law is very simple. It included literally 2 points, namely the approval of a figure of 250,000 and approval of the fact that during the special period, the number of servicemen automatically increases by the number of mobilized people according to the current legislation.
Less than 1 month after the Minsk initiative imposing a ceasefire, the situation in Ukraine is relatively calm, but very fragile. U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland accused Russia of violating the ceasefire and said Russia has increased its activity in Ukraine.
We are watching the implementation of Minsk. We do have concerns now about new firing on the ground in the last couple of days. I do think that the environment and whether this is implemented will affect the calculus both on the sanctions side and on the security support side.
But Russia's deputy defense minister dismissed these accusations.
when it comes to us, our forces are involved in usual, routine military activities. There is no any unusual activity. There is no unusual congregation anywhere, and it was not seen by international inspectors too.
Хочу сказать, а международными инспекторами.
American officials, including new Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter, support sending more arms to Ukraine. But many European officials are against this move. Now, with the new law just passed in Ukraine, fears of a heated-up conflict in the region are very real.
And now to economy. With me right now is financial analyst Lionel Friedfeld. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
Good to have you back here in the studio.
Thank you.
So you're coming here with peace news, but between Facebook and telecom operators.
Actually, exactly. The big piece of news for this Barcelona, you had the World Mobile Congress that just finished yesterday. And actually, for the first time, remember last year edition, you had a big fight in between Facebook and mobile and telecom operators because they don't have the same legal framework. Mm-hmm. This year, Mark Zuckerberg came, the CEO of Facebook, and said that mobile operators, telecom equipment are doing a great job investing billions of dollars to build networks, connecting people in the world. So the peace today is made in between Facebook, Google, and the telecom world. Google actually announced they're going to launch a virtual mobile operators in the US. So there is a big question mark, how is this company is not going to compete against regular operators in the US?
So right now they are in peace, which is good news. So now we're going to China, Beijing?
Yeah, China is a big day today because there is an annual assembly of all dignitaries of the Communist Party, which actually validating the economic plan for the outlook for 2015. Basically, they're going to say the growth is going to be set at 7%. It's in 2014 it was 7.5%. So we can see that the slowing of growth in China. But the second panel was mentioned. They're going to strengthen the anti-corruption plan in China. Today, basically what's happening in the financial market and in banks, you have been executive of Bank of Agriculture of China, which is China's largest bank, fourth largest bank, Bank of Beijing. Basically, you have executive that has been sentenced for taking bribes and corruption. So this is the second plan. And the third decision, which is expected now, is that the Chinese government will actually widespread, the ban of the fluctuation of the yuan, the Chinese currency, and maybe we'll see in the future that the yuan is going to be devaluated. Basically, it's going to help the export of China, but it's going to compete further against the US dollar.
The US. Oh,
exactly.
So this is interesting. So you came with good news today, which is very good. Lionel Friedfeld, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for the good news. Moving now to South Korea, U.S. Ambassador Mark Lippert was attacked by a Korean nationalist who slashed him in the face at an event which he was due to speak. Just before the attack, the assailant allegedly shouted that North and South Korea should be reunited. The latest from ABC News.
Ambassador Mark Lippert had just taken the first bite of his breakfast at an event when a man sneaked up from behind and went straight for his throat. Next thing he knew, there was blood. The assailant was wielding a 10-inch fruit knife, shouting anti-American slogans, witnesses say. It all happened in seconds.
I think the whole experience to him was traumatic, to say the least, and I think that was part of his expression.
Lippert was taken to the hospital, the man arrested after others at the table fought him down to the floor.
Well, I'm proud of him. I mean, he's serving our country. I think this is a risk.
Police identified him as Kim Ki-jong, a radical activist. He opposes the ongoing joint military exercises between the U.S. and South Korean forces. That's also in line with North Korean demands. 5 years ago, Kim had received a suspended 2-year prison term for throwing concrete blocks at a Japanese ambassador in Seoul. Joo Hee-cho, ABC News.
And with me right now for a look at history is I-24 News correspondent Danny Swibell. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you today?
So you are today here to remind us or give us the connection between Churchill and Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yes. I want to be very careful of direct comparisons, all right? But there are definitely common themes that happen throughout history. Yeah. March 5th, 1946, this is when Churchill gave the speech where he coined the Iron Curtain, giving rise to what was going to be the threat of the Soviet Union and warning the U.S. that it was a threat and the U.S. had to toughen its stance. The West and the USSR already had, they were already suspicious of one another, but this speech actually solidified that tension that would actually lead to the Cold War. And so what do we learn today? Well, when people draw red lines, the other side frequently crosses them. And sometimes when those lines are crossed, it can lead to the only alternative, which is sometimes war. So in history, we have to learn that sometimes the outcome you expect doesn't actually always end up turning out that way.
You just said red lines, and two people just came into my head, just like Benjamin Netanyahu and Barack Obama. I just don't know which red line was like a thinner than the other one that brought.
But I know it's a tricky game with these coins, and when you even give expressions like "never again," because this was a time when Churchill had said, "Well, the Soviets are like the new Hitler," and this is another comparison where we're saying, "Well, the Iranians are like the new Hitler." We have to be careful when we make these comparisons because is it just good and bad guys? Is it that much of a zero-sum game? Should we be careful when we use terms like this? Because sometimes people listen and then they take action, and when they take action, it could lead to. It didn't lead to the Cold War. It was the Cold War after all. It didn't lead to nuclear annihilation between the two countries, but it did lead to millions of deaths throughout the world in proxy wars, South America, Korea's, Vietnam. So we have to be careful. It might not be direct confrontation between Iran and the West, but if we're not careful looking at history and going forward, it could lead to many decades of perhaps proxy wars and deaths throughout the Middle East and the world.
Yes, and many decades of threatening and many years of threatening and telling us that the bomb is about to explode.
It's a sad reality.
Danny Swabel, thank you very much for this.
Thanks for having me.
And after Benjamin Netanyahu's speech in the Congress, just what here Danny mentioned, the other controversies in Washington, Hillary Clinton has been under fire for using a personal email server during her time as Secretary of State. Republicans say Clinton may have broken the law. Ayman Siksik has more on the one message Hillary Clinton was not happy to receive this week.
Hillary Clinton broke her silence Wednesday over a budding controversy involving her use of personal email for work during her term as Secretary of State. She said that she wanted the U.S. State Department to release them so the public could see them. Clinton reportedly set up an email server in her home in New York. Two top aides are also accused of using private email accounts for official business. The controversy over email comes at a particularly strategic time for Clinton's opponents, as she is widely expected to launch a bid for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2016. Democrats scrambled to contain the fallout from the revelations.
And as soon as we reached out to the former Secretary Clinton provided the emails covering the breadth of her time at the State Department on a wide variety of issues. It's my understanding that those were provided in that way.
The email controversy erupted after the U.S. House of Representatives Select Committee on Benghazi demanded all communications from Clinton related to the Benghazi attack. Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 others were killed during an assault on a U.S. facility in 2012. Republican lawmakers believe Clinton did not do enough to ensure the safety of Americans in Libya. A total of 55,000 pages of material covering the time she was in office were turned over by Clinton. The State Department has defended her, saying that at the time there was no prohibition on using a personal email account for official business as long as it was archived. But experts have called her use of personal email highly unusual, and that her practice risked national security by leaving communications open to hacking.
She always sent a mail. I'm not saying anything. Now to sports. Yeah, and now with me is
the one and only
Jonathan Regev.
Mr. Regev! Yay!
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good is good.
Yeah. Good. So, Barcelona, you promised yesterday.
Yes.
It wasn't so long ago.
Do I keep my promises? Do I know what I'm talking about?
Sometimes you don't.
I said there's going to be a Barcelona derby at the final of the Spanish Cup. I was wrong. There's not going to be a Barcelona derby. There's going to be another derby, even more interesting. What do I mean? It's going to be Barcelona that we see here beating Villarreal 3-1 at the second leg. They will face Athletic Bilbao. Why do I call this a derby? What's interesting about this? This competition is called Copa del Rey, the King's Cup, the Spanish Cup. It's the two teams, Barcelona representing Catalonia, Athletic Bilbao representing the Basque Country. They hate the Spanish government. They hate the Spanish royalty. They will play for the King's Cup in Spain. This already happened twice, in 2012 and 2009, when the Spanish anthem was played before the game. All the fans of both teams strongly booed their national anthem. We should expect pretty much the same this time.
And if we want to say mucha suerte to whom we're saying it?
Mucha suerte a ambos, I'd say. Good luck to both.
Yes.
Good, Atletico Madrid. Atletico Madrid became. I always was. Atletico Madrid is not there. I don't care.
Let's talk about London and Manchester.
Yes, there's always a rivalry. Who is the capital of football in England? There's London with all the big teams, Chelsea and Arsenal, and Tottenham, West Ham. On the other hand, Manchester with City and United. Manchester is now getting a little edge. Why? Because of hotel football. We're seeing it here right across the Old Trafford, across the road from Old Trafford, the home ground of Manchester United.
Football?
Yes, Ryan Giggs, he's a former player of Manchester United, and now he's assistant manager. He's one of the investors in this hotel. It's a hotel that is themed completely about football. There's a football pitch, 5-on-5, right on the roof. Everything, it opened this week. Everything is football themed. If you're a fan, I know you're a fan, go there right now.
Of course, I'm going to book my room just
log
after
into
the edition. Again, flying people.
Yes,
Jonathan.
That's what you bring me here for. Let's
course,
be
for the flying people.
Let's be real. So we're speaking about the freestyle, slope style, downhill skiing, and it just looks good because they don't only jump; they do really, really cool stuff. Look at this. He just comes there and he jumps over something, and then he comes over beautiful stuff, and it looks good. The winner of this competition, which took place in France, is American McRae Williams. He won this competition. He's second in the overall standings. Second place in this competition is Gus Gentworthy, also from the U.S. He is the leader, although in the overall standings.
You know what
it always
I
looks
realized?
Good. What?
That you really want to fly.
Yes, I'd love to, but I'm afraid.
So I'm flying you out of the seat.
Flying out!
Jonathan Regev, thank you very much for this. Always a pleasure. Have a great weekend. 2 minutes. We will be back for election 2015. Don't go anywhere.